right? Deuteronomy 2, let's call this one afraid, because as Moses continues on giving us the history of how Israel got here, he is again going to mention a king by the name of Sihon at the end of chapter 2 and Og at the beginning of chapter 3. Again, two of the kings whose territory he first gave over to Israel. Not exactly the first two, but they're two of the first. But he's going to back up and give us a little bit more context, also showing us three kingdoms or territories that they weren't to contend with. And these are going to be actually three of their relatives, for lack of a better term. First and foremost, Edom, a relatively close relative. The word is actually going to describe as a brother. Why? Because going back to the lineage, these children of Israel are descendants of Jacob. That was his name before he was named Israel, thus the children of Israel. The Edomites, however, come from Esau, his blood brother. They're not to disturb the kingdom of the Edomites. Likewise, they're not to disturb the Moabites and the Ammonites, who, going back a little further, are actually the children of Abraham's nephew, Lot. And so understand, they are the descendants of Abraham. So all of these folks are described as being relatively close relatives, whom they are not to contend with on their way to Sihon and Og, who they are to contend with. But understand, this is a chapter that once again is giving us more insight than we saw in the book of Numbers. Why? Because it's literally going to say, don't contend with any of these three, but it's going to give us a little bit more insight into what is motivating the Edomites. When it says in, roughly verse 4, you are about to pass through the territory of your brothers, the people of Esau, who live in Seir, and they will be afraid of you. So be very careful. Do not contend with them. That's verse 4 leading into verse 5. But that gives us more insight into their mentality and their fear than we got back in chapter 20 of Numbers, where it simply reads, understanding that they are approaching the Edomites. Verse 17 of Numbers 20, please let us pass through your land. We will not pass through field or vineyard or drink water from a well. We will go along the king's highway. We will not turn aside to the right hand or to the left hand until we have passed through your territory. Verse 18, but Edom said to him, you shall not pass through, lest I come out with the sword against you. And skipping down to verse 20, but he said, you shall not pass through. And Edom came out against them with a large army and with a strong force. Pause. It seems so different than what we see in Deuteronomy, where God is saying, they're afraid of you. But the outward expression of that fear is a lot of bravado. Oh, and the lesson may be obvious. There are times in life where we don't get the benefit of the insight ahead of time, like the Israelites seem to have gotten here. It's almost like that proverb or story I heard about two hikers split up in the wilderness. They're hiking, and one comes up on a cabin from the rear, and they pass by because it looks pretty dilapidated, beat up, run down. They just keep moving on. Another one passes by a cabin from the front side. Doesn't stop, but it looks beautiful from the front. And he wonders how such an immaculately kept cabin is out in this part of the forest. And when they regroup, they talk about what they saw. And the more they talk, the more they realize they saw the same cabin from two different perspectives. Life is a lot like that. We don't always get the entire picture until later. And so sometimes we are left to interpret the outward appearance, the bravado, without insight into a person's fears and anxieties and whatnot. And so it is once again of utmost importance that we learn how to discern. And once again, part of the reason that we have a relationship with God is so that we can tap into a wisdom beyond our own to see past the surface, whether it involves a lot of bravado or a lot of meekness. Because Sun Tzu in The Art of War said this, look, when you're weak, pretend that you're strong. And when you're strong, you don't so much have to. You keep your enemy guessing, because much of war is the art of deception. Now, that's secular wisdom that helps us understand the degree to which, if we're going to follow Jesus' command, we need to be as wise as serpents and gentle as doves, and ask God to help us see beyond the surface of either bravado or meekness to understand what's really going on in the people with whom we're called to love.